Working with languages doesn't mean just language teacher or translators. There's much more coming up. Hello and welcome back to the Freelanceverse. Thanks for coming back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Today we have a guest episode. Sonia Kampshoff is coming on the channel. She has a very interesting profile. She used to be a translator, now turned data marketer. And she's also hosting a podcast called Working with Languages. I recently did an episode on there. If you want to check it out, make sure to click over here in the corner and also in the description. All about working with languages is in there. It's an excellent podcast. She invites a variety of guests with different backgrounds. What they all have in common is they work with languages in some capacity. So there are translators on there, but there are a bunch of other people on there as well. Super interesting. And also her story is very inspiring for anyone that is working as a translator, maybe wants to branch out a bit. She made the switch from translation to digital marketing. So we get to know a bit more about her journey as well. Make sure to check out the show. She's available everywhere where you get your podcasts from. Make sure to let her know that you came over from the Freelanceverse. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Welcome back, everyone, to the channel. Today I have Sonia with me. Thank you so much for taking the time to coming on the channel, Sonia.
Hello, Adrian. It's such a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, of course. We just recorded, I don't know when your episode goes out, but we just recorded an episode for your podcast. More on that in a second. First, we want to know a bit more about yourself. Could you give the viewers a short introduction about yourself?
Sure. I'm European. That's the summary of it. I originally come from Italy. I grew up in Italy. My father is Italian, my mother is German, and I've always had a very strong connection with Germany. I've been living now in England, in the UK for over 20 years. And growing up bilingual, really. I always loved languages, and I loved studying languages. So I went to university in Trieste and I studied translation studies. And initially also worked as a translator, but then in the meantime, I've transitioned to digital marketing. And last year I started a bit of a side project, call it passion project, if you like, which is a podcast, which is all about working with languages.
It's so cool. And we recently met in kind of an online gathering, and I heard about your podcast. And since then, I listened to many episodes of people that I know as well that are on there. So it's so cool to, sometimes you're just not aware of all these exactly passion projects of people that are out there. So it's very good to connect with you. Can we wheel back to the translation part? Can you tell us a bit, how did that start? How did you get your start in the industry? Where did you work first? And how did that snowball?
Yeah, I always loved languages, and I always knew I wanted to work with languages. So, I sort of decided to go with translation. And at university, I studied English and German, translating then with the purpose of translating that into Italian because I grew up in Italy. And I really liked the course. There were a lot of different topics and translation for different angles and for different industries. And I thought it was really interesting. And I also remember that during my studies, at some point, I wanted to earn some money. I had less a class commitment. So I found a freelance work as an interpreter for really huge printing machines, the ones that print posters and newspapers. And I was traveling across Europe, accompanying the technicians, installing the new machines and training up staff. And that was a really good way of, sort of making money on the side. It required a lot of travel. So in a way, it's ideal for students. And then when I graduated, I actually decided I wanted to go abroad. And initially I thought work would take me to Germany, but no, it was London. The classic example, I came over for a project of 4 months and now it's 22 years. And I specialized in localization, so translating software, both, what you see on the screen and everything else that is in the background, linguistically, not the programming. And I worked first freelance, translating SAP software into Italian. And then I found work employed for a software company. I was there only for a year and a half, more or less, because the company was acquired and my position, a few others were penned out. And that was a bit of a transition moment. So I worked, I graduated in 2003, moved to London in 2004, and I worked purely as a translator until about 2007. And the next job I found was a bit different. It was for a startup selling, of all things, gold bars online, all very legitimate. And they were established in the UK and they wanted to expand to Europe. So they hired me for my language, Italian and also German. And I translated all the website. For the terms and conditions, we had a lawyer because I don't specialize in legal translations. But I translated everything, all the website, all the help content. And then I started also translating the automated emails and all the marketing materials. And I also started doing a bit of marketing at some point because once all the translations were done, I started helping out with the marketing directly. It was a very interesting time actually because the company grew incredibly because it was 2007. I joined at the beginning of the year. And at the end, in September, we had the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and that was sort of the start of the 2008 financial crisis. And I was very lucky because I was in a very stable job when everybody else were a bit nervous about their jobs. And it really allowed me to hone my skills there and understand how to work in a fast environment where things can change. And I started learning about marketing, and I realized that actually I like it. I like marketing because it's digital marketing in particular, because there's a lot of user psychology. You need to understand why people behave in a certain way online, but there's a lot of numbers as well. I spend a lot of time in Excel. And by connecting the two of them, I just really enjoy it. So I decided to stick to marketing, and I left to do a master in marketing at a European business school, which gave me also the bit of the business background. And I've stayed in marketing ever since, specializing in paid media, which is essentially advertising on Google, social media, including LinkedIn. And interestingly, I haven't left behind my languages, because I would say it varies, but about half of the work I do is digital marketing, paid media with languages. So either UK businesses expanding to Europe, Germany and Italy in particular, or American companies expanding to the UK and Europe. I haven't done a lot of work with European companies expanding to the UK, but I'm open for that. It just hasn't happened yet. I find this very interesting because although I transitioned away from translation where languages are the service and the product, I'm still very much involved with languages and also the cultural side, of making sure that our website looks local rather than just purely translated. Yeah. And the same with ads, sometimes you can tell whether an ad has been just translated by someone who doesn't understand the language very much. So I make sure that it's all finessed and fine-tuned. And it's been also really interesting to see all the digital transition, not necessarily transition, but the changes throughout the years.
Yeah, that is a very interesting intersection, exactly, because you do have the language background, but you can now offer the full package to a company that wants to advertise in German and Italian market. And funnily enough, you told me that you are a native German, but you've never even lived in a German-speaking country, right?
No, it's a bit the funny part of me. My father's Italian, my mother's German. And although I was born and raised in Italy, in Italy we have with these infamously long summer holidays, 3.5 months every year. And my mother just sent us to Germany every summer for 6 weeks at a time, and I would go to my grandmother. My sister would go to my aunt in a different town. I don't think an Italian mama would do that, but it worked in mine and my sister's favor because that's how we learned the languages. It's immersion in the culture and the language. That's how you learn a language really well. Although I've never been a resident of Germany, I spent a lot of time there on holiday. I make a joke sometimes that Germans go to Italy on holiday. I did the other way around.
The opposite. Who knew that your mom was laying the groundwork for your localization career early on, huh?
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, and that's also it's very cool to bring you on the channel because I know that many translators are getting a bit restless sometimes or just want to expand their horizon as well. And it's very nice to see someone who transitioned away from translation but still keeps the language attached to it. And it does sound all very organic, your switch, right? There was not a
Yeah.
big moment of I need to leave this industry. It was just the next thing led to the other. Now you are freelance, you're self-employed in the
Yeah.
digital marketing sphere.
Yeah.
Okay. How does how do your own marketing efforts look like? How do you acquire new clients? How do you expand your network at the moment?
So I have worked before that a long time in-house, for mostly for technology company, and I changed a few times, sometimes for redundancy, sometimes for my own choice. And I also, the last 2 years before going freelance, I worked for a digital marketing agency. So I think that was very useful for me to have a perspective of both what an agency looks like working with clients, but also how companies work internally. What, how the stakeholders internally and externally, how it all works, how it functions. So when I went freelance, and that was at the end of 2020 with COVID, I just needed a change. And it was quite smooth because I didn't reinvent the wheel. I just continued to do it what I was doing before, just freelance. And at the beginning, the first 3 months were a little slow, but then it just picked up. And I'm in a lucky position in that with paid media, because you spend money, say, for example, in e-commerce, with e-commerce clients, you spend money 24/7. Lead gen can be weekdays only, but I spend money all the time, essentially. So people want to have, I have a lot of retainer clients who want me there, maybe not all the time every day, but they want me there almost every day. And they want me there for a prolonged period of time because then I get to know the account, and that's of an advantage for everyone. All of this to say that I have a lot of recurring clients. On occasion, I have projects, but even projects tend to be months long. And that means that I don't need a lot of clients, and I don't need a lot of new clients. I find that, for example, word of mouth has worked in my advantage. I've been recommended on even by agencies who knew another agency, for example, who was looking for a freelancer. I work both with agencies and directly with brands and businesses, mostly medium-sized. Also, LinkedIn has been important, both in, people, I have visibility and people see me in the feed, but also by just putting in the services. And sometimes I get, a request for a proposal based on my services, and that works quite well. And I think that overall, mostly my online presence on LinkedIn and through my website as well, word of mouth, those are really the main channels where I find work.
And I feel like you have a very unique position as you work in marketing, so you can actually use your expertise also for yourself, right? You can,
Yeah.
I don't know if you do also paid marketing for your own services or that's not needed at the moment.
I have tested it when I started out, and I find that it doesn't really work. You need to pay Google as well. You have a media spend. And it doesn't really work for freelancers as well as it does for agencies. Maybe because they have a bigger budget, or because people clicking on sponsored links are more inclined to want to work with an agency rather than a single freelancer.
And I find it interesting that I don't know if that was also part of your motivation, but one way to kind of divert from what you usually do and probably also to put your name out there was starting the podcast, right? So can you tell us a bit about the motivation, the ambition behind that?
Yeah, so my podcast is a little bit different than your YouTube channel in that it's not meant to directly generate leads for my marketing work. If it does, I'm very happy about it, and it certainly gives me visibility in a wider sense. But the reason I launched the podcast is really this question that I've had since I was a child. What work can I do with languages? And, most people instinctively think of language teachers and translators, which also, people who choose these two careers tend to have a different personalities. And then, there's also the question about employed and freelance, which one do you prefer? And I think I just wanted to explore more about what is out there, where, whether language is the main service or product, or maybe it's an add-on, something additional. And the podcast is simply a collection of stories and conversation with people who do just that. They work with languages. And I also talk, for example, to people in leadership positions. For example, Fritz, one of the early guests, who is, I think he's a vice president in a travel technology company, and he has worked in different countries, and he sees languages as a means for conflict resolution. Understanding languages, how people talk, how people behave, how people, the cultures, and how you can work with people internationally and of different cultures and languages. But I also talk, for example, one of my bit of a different guest is a lady who is a celebrant for non-religious weddings, funerals, and baby naming ceremonies. So essentially Christian names, but not religious. And she is from Wales. So she does her ceremonies in English, Welsh, and also French, because her French is very good. So, and although that is more on a part-time basis on the side, now she had a baby, so she has, she left her previous work and does this more. But it's just nice, I find, to hear stories of people doing different work with languages. And also another example, I haven't recorded this yet, it's still in the planning. My sister a few years ago changed career, and she now works for the German embassy, embassies abroad. And I remember when she told me, I was like, oh, wow, of course, when I renew my passport, I go into an embassy and I can see people working there. But I never before thought of, how did these people get the job there? What do they need to do? And what job types are there in an embassy? And how do they get to work there? I don't want to work there, but I remember thinking, oh, wow, I never thought about it. And essentially, this is what I want to do with my podcast. I want to give people ideas. And I think the idea also is at some point, this is still in the planning, but my idea is to, maybe in 12 months' time, is to have a website where I can list job openings that people can apply for. So if you have these languages, this kind of experience, these industries, be it marketing or anything else, freelance or employed, I would like to have a list of jobs that are available so that people can click and, first of all, see if it is of interest for them, and then, if so, apply and get a job with languages.
See, that's where your marketer skills come into play. Right? Already choosing the name, working with languages is a perfect domain for that. So that's brilliant. I love it. I find it so interesting. So it's also, the fact that you focus on jobs that at first glance, they don't seem to be language jobs, right? But then in the background, it always, I years back now, I made a video, something called jobs for language students or something like that. And it's still one of my top performing videos, because people are in this situation that we were in, like we were good in languages. Now what can we do? So it's brilliant that you do that. And what is the selection process like for the guests? How do you find them? How do you approach them?
Well, first of all, they need to work with languages in some shape or form, whether it, even communication in the wider sense, if it implies, it includes languages. I also generally speak with a person beforehand so that there's a connection. I find that, first of all, it helps me to understand whether that is the right person for the podcast, and also once we record, it's easier. There's more of a connection, and I find that the interview flows better. I also like to have a variety. I have a background in translation. I understand the industry. It's easy for me to find translators. So there's quite a few translation guests already, but I don't want it to be only about that, because I want to give the variety of jobs. So first of all, I tapped into my network of friends and people that I know through work and, friends of friends. I'm also at the point where people start just contacting me. And sometimes they're right. And sometimes I say, not quite the right thing for my podcast. But yeah, people are very happy for people to contact me. Another job that I haven't recorded, but I would love to record, and maybe if you know someone or some of your listeners know someone, is customer success, which is, put very simply, customer success is normally for companies who produce and sell a software. And it is post-sales, so there's no, commission and the stress of reaching targets and so on. But it's more post-sale, and it's a nurturing role. It's nurturing the relationships so that people who bought the software use it. They use it. The point is for them to renew the license, maybe upsell, cross-sell, and so on. But reduce the churn so that they don't lose them essentially as a client.
Okay, so if anyone is watching in customer success, reach out to Sonia. That would be a very interesting episode. There's still so much I need to catch up on the show, but I love where it's going. I love the direction. I love what it is. Where do you see the direction? What you already mentioned the website, but what is the let's say in a year, where will the podcast be? Where will your work be? What is the split currently? Do you want to change the split between content and production? Can you give us an insight into your plans for the future?
Yeah, I want it to be a treasure trove of inspiration for people, so that the podcast will certainly continue. I'm planning a bit of a break over, the summer holidays and Christmas and so on. But generally speaking, every 2 weeks on a Thursday, you can expect a new episode to come out. And I want a variety of jobs, freelance, employed, men, women, a bit of everything from... At the moment, my guests are mostly from Europe, simply because I'm based here and I find it easier to find connections, but I'm very open to other continents, the Americas, Asia, all of that, it's there's languages everywhere, really. And I would like this really to be a source of inspiration for everyone. And I would like them then to have the possibility of, going to look out for jobs. So having a job directory. I think there will be many other things. I don't want to, I haven't really figured them out yet, because I want them to be, whatever I offer, I want it to be something that people want. And I want to develop this relationship with my listeners where, they give me feedback and they give me ideas of what other products or services or content ideas that I can offer. So at the moment, I'm still in this. I launched it in September last year. It's less than a year old. It's, 7 months? So it's still very, very much in its infancy, but I really feel inspired. When you create, I think maybe you find the same, that when you create something new from scratch, it's very empowering and very creative, and you feel really this desire to keep on going. And the other thing that struck me is that, as a marketer, I'm always thinking, who are my competitors? Who should I be looking out, on the size of what I'm doing? And I couldn't find anyone who does exactly this. It's either, in terms of podcasts, it's more language related in terms of linguistics, or maybe it's purely work or career switches. But there's no one really exploring careers with languages. So I don't have any direct competitors, which is great, but also it's a bit more, it gives me more freedom of going in the direction that I want, but also with more freedom comes, more decisions. Where do I want to go? So
Leading the way, exactly.
keep tuned.
Okay, that's so nice. I'm very happy for you to see this motivation and ambition. And I know exactly what you mean when, especially in the first year, that's the honeymoon phase, right? That's when everything falls into place and everything works. So I'm gonna, of course, links will pop up on the screen, in the description, everywhere. Check out Sonia's podcast, Working with Languages, and also reach out to her directly. What is the best way to reach you on LinkedIn, I assume?
LinkedIn, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those, YouTube, everywhere where you normally listen to your podcasts. LinkedIn as well, and I'll give you the link for the show notes. And it's also hosted on my website at the moment, my marketing website for now. I will build a new website, but it's currently on moreperfect.digital/podcast.
All the links will be down below. Check it out. Thank you so much, Sonia, for joining us today. This was very insightful, and I hope a lot of people will switch over to your project as well. And maybe we see each other again on this channel or on your channel in the future.
Yeah, maybe I can come back in a year or so and give you an update of where I am.
Thank you. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I see you next Monday with the next one. Take care.